Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all very caffeinated up for this continuation. So I'm going to be talking about implementation, the third section of the proposal that is evaluated. I will not make the case that this is necessarily the most important section, the way Ricardo did. But nevertheless, we're about to start talking about some nitty-gritty details, which are kind of the meat and bones of your project. So it is very important. So listen up, and here we go. So first off, let me give you some idea of the award or evaluation criteria that your evaluators will use when looking at your implementation section. So they'll judge your quality and the efficiency of your implementation. You can get up to 5 points for this section. And what will be judged is the following: quality and effectiveness of the work plan, assessment of risks, and appropriateness of the effort assigned to work packages and the resources overall, which sounds like a lot of details, and it is. Furthermore, your evaluators will also judge your capacity and role of each participant or applicant, and the extent to which the consortium as a whole brings together the necessary expertise. So you can see, like I mentioned, there are a lot of details in this section that you need to think about, that you need to have well planned. For instance, there's your work plan, there's your risks that you have to discuss, the work packages themselves, as well as the resources, and then the consortium itself, or the role of each participant in the consortium. So what does this look like in practice? In practice, in your implementation section, you'll have, at this point now in Horizon Europe, only two subchapters, sorry, actually. The first one, 3.1, is your work plan and your resources, and that's up to 14 pages, which will include tables that are provided in the template. And in 3.2, the second subchapter, this is the capacity of participants and the consortium as a whole, and this is up to 3 pages. So in the first subchapter, this is where, again, you discuss the overall work structure of your work plan, the timing of your work plan, for instance, using a Gantt chart, the interrelations between your work packages, etc. And this is done with a lot of tables that, again, the template does provide for you. So there's a whole list of tables in this section that you need to become aware of, because this is what you'll be filling in when you do this part of the proposal. The first one is table 3.1, list of work packages. Then the second table is the work package description. Then you'll have a list of deliverables, as well as a list of milestones, and then a table based on your critical the risks that might be involved in the implementation of your methods. There are another 4 tables after that. This is basically tables involving the staff you'll use, the costs that will be involved, subcontracting costs, etc. Where I today can be of most use to you, and where there can be, I think, in the end, the most variation in these tables, depending on your project, is in these first 5 tables. So this is what I'm going to be focusing on today. And I will give you a basic overview of what's involved in each of these tables, as well as some tips for each. So let's start with the first one. The first one being the list of work packages. So how do you even get to this list of work packages? Well, obviously at the beginning of your project, you identify the different phases your project will go through, and you divide up these project phases into work packages and subsequent tasks that will be involved in each. Obviously, this is going to differ for every single project, because every single project is different in terms of its scale and its size. So there really is no set rule for how many work packages you should have. You should have as many as you need to meet your objectives, simply. And then after you divide up all your project phases into different work packages, you need to do something like a PERT diagram, which is suggested in the template, which looks something like this. And this just shows the interrelation or the links between all your work packages. So for instance, you can see here in this project that has something like 9 work packages. And a diagram like this is really helpful for your reviewers, because they can easily and quickly get an idea, an overview of all your work packages, and see the links between them. So for instance, in this project, you can see here, for instance, that the data collection from work package 1, as well as data collection from work packages 3, 4, and 5, all feed into their model calibrations in work package 2, for instance. And then, for instance, other links, well, you can see their work package 9, dissemination and outreach, pulls from all the previous work packages. So this is just, again, a very schematic example of a PERT diagram. Yours might look very different, but you need something like this to show your reviewers the links between your different work packages. Moving on, the second table, work package description. So we've gotten to this point where you've designed your nice little PERT diagram and you've shown your reviewers the links between your work packages. You also need to give them a lot more detail about what's involved in each work package and which role each of your partners is going to play in these work packages, as well as your plan for the timing of these work packages. And this is what you do using a Gantt chart, which looks something like this. Again, this is a pretty schematic example, but it gives you the basic idea. With a Gantt chart, you show both in the rows here on this side, you see both work packages as well as tasks involved in work packages, and then the people involved. So the collaborators involved that will be involved in each of these tasks. And in the rows here, in the columns, sorry, you have basically the time scale for the whole duration of the project. So if the reviewers are interested in judging your feasibility, the feasibility of your project, which they very much will be, they will be able to say, okay, how much time have you allotted to this task? Is it the right person to do this task, etc.? Have you planned your timing for the entire duration, not only of the work packages, but of your whole project at the same time well enough, etc.? So this Gantt chart is actually fairly important. Again, it's one of these tools that reviewers like to use to get a very brief but good overview of the planning of your project in order to judge its feasibility. Okay, moving on, table 3.1c, your list of deliverables. So as many of you might already know, this is terminology that hasn't really changed from Horizon 2020. A deliverable is simply the output of your project. So there are 7 types. Horizon Europe now specifies the 7 types, and when you fill in this table, you have to specify which type of deliverable each of your deliverables is. So obviously this can be anything from a report to a prototype to a data set, and there is a complete list in the proposal template that you can use. There's also 4 dissemination levels, and you have to indicate for each of your deliverables what level of dissemination you intend. So obviously, to some degree, the ideal is public dissemination. That's what we all like these days with open science, open access, etc. But obviously, not all of your deliverables, not all of the products of your project will be able to be disseminated at that level. So there's, again, this list of 4 different dissemination levels, and you can choose from public all the way down to classified or protected. Okay, a couple tips with your deliverables. Be realistic. The European Commission will monitor the submission of your deliverables. This is part of the contractual obligation under the grant agreement. So make sure that your deliverables are things that both correspond to your objectives that you've already set up in your excellence section, as well as things that you know you can achieve, because these will be things that the Commission will want to see you have produced. And be concrete. Deliverables must be concrete and ideally quantifiable to be considered an actual product of the project, sorry. Okay, table 3.1d, list of milestones. Again, another bit of terminology that has not changed from Horizon 2020. Milestones are simply internal checkpoints for the progress of your project. These 2, along with deliverables, will be assessed over the duration of your project, and they form part of the contractual obligation under your grant agreement. So again, you need to use also very concrete indicators to show that your milestones have been attained. Milestones can really be anything that you will find useful to give you, as well as the Commission, an idea of the progress of your project and the fact that it is on course and producing at the rate that you had originally intended. So just as an example, for instance, this could be something like a prototype that has been tested and shown to be functional. So there's the concrete part, not just a prototype, but a prototype that has already been tested and shown to be functional. Okay, table 3.1e, we come to risks. So these are critical risks for implementation. This is not just, there is one aspect in the excellence section where you mentioned potential impediments to your project, but that is not the risks. The risks are here in the implementation section that you address, and risks are specifically defined as plausible events or issues that could have a high adverse impact on the project's objectives. So these are things that could occur specifically in relation to the project objectives, which would mean you would find it harder to attain these objectives. For each risk that you identify, you have to define the likelihood, that is just simply the probability that it occurs, and identify whether it's low, medium, or high likelihood. You also have to identify the level of severity. So this is not the probability. If the risk, this is the idea that if the risk does occur, how serious is this for the project? How serious of an impact will it have on your objectives? And the level of severity, you're supposed to identify as well as low, medium, or high. For each of these risks, and this is crucial, you need mitigation measures, or what we would call a plan B. For this, you need to be concrete. And the idea is not just to say, yes, these risks might occur, but to show, okay, if each of these risks occur, here's what we're going to do. We have a concrete plan for how to minimize the risk and how to help us, nevertheless, achieve our objectives. Things you need to consider. And actually this I can't see anymore, sorry. Okay, your evaluators' perceptions of your plans and their potential risks. So the whole point of identifying these risks is to sort of jump the gun on your evaluators. They too, especially when you have reviewers who are experts in your field, will see your methods and at some point wonder, well, what about this? What about this potential risk? What about that? So the point of identifying these risks and to identify all potential risks is to show evaluators, well, no, actually, we're aware. We've planned for these risks, and for each of them, we have our plan B. So as always, keep your evaluators in mind when you're defining and discussing your risks. Okay, that I mentioned. Okay, so second subchapter, capacity of participants and consortium as a whole. So this is not the section for the description of individual members of your consortium, by the way. That goes in part A. This is simply the section where you discuss the complementarity of the members of your consortium, in essence. So you describe the consortium in relation to the project's objectives, and if possible, with an emphasis on SSH, so social sciences and the humanities, as well as with an emphasis on gender aspects of research and innovation, as well as and open science practices. Here's where also you describe any access to critical infrastructure. So any infrastructure that's critical to the project. If any of the consortium members bring this to the project, you would describe it here. As well as the partners' complementarity. So that's the complementarity of each partner to the consortium as a whole. And the contribution that each will make to the project. So the idea is each must have a valid role. Obviously, it does no good anymore to simply include big names on these projects because they are big names. They need to actually have a valid role in terms of the objectives of the project. You also discuss any industrial or commercial involvement any of the partners might have in this section, as well as explain the involvement of any countries and internal organizations and justify any members who are not automatically eligible. That is, any members of the consortium who are not from a member state, associated country, or listed in the work program itself. Again, the overall goal of this section is not to describe the individual members of the consortium, but to show more or less that your consortium is made up of people who complement each other's abilities and expertise, and that they are the right people for the right tasks, the tasks that will address your objectives. Okay, just a few general tips before I close and let Nicole take over. In terms of your project structure, make sure you have a coherent work plan. Make sure this coherent work plan is based on work packages that have not only links to each other, but links to your objectives specifically and clearly. Each work package needs to be part of the whole proposal. You need to tell one story. So while there will be obviously individual work packages that will have individual links to your objectives, they still need to form one coherent story together and not be just simply disparate parts of sub-projects. In terms of your consortium, these are a couple of questions you want to ask yourself about the consortium as you're forming it. Does the consortium fulfill all the objectives? So you obviously start with the objectives and add consortium members later. And are the partners appropriate for the tasks that we've designed? And have you selected complementary partners with different expertise? Obviously, there's no need to have partners that simply overlap in their expertise. And then lastly, in terms of project management, the management structure is no longer evaluated in Horizon Europe. However, a work package on project management is very helpful to show your evaluators that you've planned how you'll manage your team. Make sure you do address any and all risks, as I mentioned, to show your evaluators that you're prepared for any eventuality and that you have a contingency plan for each, a concrete contingency plan. Okay, and just to finish up, some implementation do's and don'ts. Do emphasize the link between your impact section and your work packages. Do make tasks and deliverables concrete. This is key with all the details that you'll find in this implementation section. The more concrete you are in your details, the better. So that's in terms of deliverables, being quantifiable, milestones, etc. Do choose complementary partners whose expertise creates a synergy. Lastly, two little don'ts here. Don't describe your plans in vague terms. Again, be concrete with all of them, and don't hesitate to contact us or your regional office in your region. Thank you very much. And Nicole, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So as the last session of the proposal template, we will see now some legal and financial aspects on the implementation section. Be aware that most of the things we will see now are actually not placed physically inside the implementation section, rather in part A. However, let's say that these tables that we will look at are complementary to the implementation section, and most of the time need to be coherent with what you describe, especially in the work packages description. Starting with, for example, the budget table. This is in part A of the proposal, but the numbers that you will include in this table need to match with the numbers that you include in each work package regarding the costs for work package. As mentioned already earlier, you should include your budget inside as a participant, as associated country. So as you see here, for example, here is Netherlands, but will come Switzerland, for example. And we have several different cost categories. They are divided primarily into two big groups, direct costs and indirect costs. The direct costs have included personnel costs, so your employees, natural persons such as in-house consultants, seconded personnel, and SME owners who do not receive salary. You include subcontracting costs. Remember, subcontractors need to follow the principle of best value for money and no conflict of interest. And then other purchase costs, which include travel and substances, equipment, which means not the full cost of the big equipment, rather its depreciation costs during the project time, and other goods, works, and services. And finally, category D, other cost categories, refer to any additional cost category available according to which call you're applying to. And then we have indirect costs. So it's a 25% flat rate on the sum of all your direct costs except for subcontracting. And this is automatically calculated. What type of costs should you consider? Well, only costs that are eligible. What does it mean? That are costs actually incurred for the project and during the project period. They need to be indicated in the budget, so you cannot later on ask for other costs that you didn't indicate in the table. They need to be identifiable and verifiable, compliant with the applicable national laws, and reasonable, justified, and compliant with some financial management principles. Common mistakes is indeed to blow up the budget and make no realistic budget estimate, or for example, not including the requested EU contribution. So you place all your costs, but at the end you don't put how much you want to ask to the Commission to give you. So don't forget to place that important number. And for example, including costs among beneficiaries. So remember, you cannot purchase or buy goods or services from other beneficiaries of your consortium. As you saw from the budget table, there are possibilities of having also somebody helping you in the project. In general, the beneficiaries should provide the core activities and implement the major part of the project. However, you can include third parties. Third parties do not belong to your consortium. They do not receive funding from the Commission and do not sign the grant agreement or the consortium agreement, rather bilateral agreements with the beneficiary that is linked to it. There are 4 types of third parties, as you can see, and now we will see the difference between them. So affiliated entities is what in Horizon 2020 was called was called linked third parties. Their main requirement is to be linked legally or with a capital to one of the beneficiaries. And they also need to have the same requirements of a beneficiary, such as being based in a member state or associated country. They can perform work and tasks in the project and retain the IP, and the budget and the costs of the affiliated entities are declared and included in the budget table. Then we have associated partners, which in Horizon 2020 were called international partners. These associated partners need to be linked to one of the beneficiaries, which will be responsible for them, or to the whole consortium. They can perform the work and the task of the project and retain the IP. The budget, however, is only declared in the proposal and not then later in the grant agreement. The costs are not reimbursed. So the declaration of their costs in the budget, the proposal stage, is just for an indication of the whole cost of the project, but just for information, because again, the cost of associated partners will not be reimbursed by the European Commission. This, as mentioned earlier, can be in case of later association or not association of Swiss entities, the role that Swiss entities will play inside of a project. Again, do not fear the fact that costs are not reimbursed by the European Commission, because as mentioned before, the SERI will take over and will cover your costs during this collaborative project. Finally, we have other 2 types of third parties which didn't change in terminology in Horizon Europe. So in-kind contributions and subcontractors. In-kind contributors basically provide resources in kind, for example, seconded personnel or access to equipment. So they do not perform the work because they just provide resources. And their budget is declared either in the seconded personnel, so under personnel costs, or under purchase costs. And finally, the subcontractors, again, they need to respect the best value for money principle selection and no conflict of interest. You do not need to identify them already at the proposal stage. You can only say you will have a subcontractor and identify them only later during the project. They perform the work and tasks inside the project, but they do not retain the IP, as this is given to the beneficiary that is linked to them. And remember, you cannot subcontract activities among the different beneficiaries inside your consortium. Now we move on another table present in part A, which however, again, refers to the activities described in the implementation section. And this is the ethics issues table. This one is mandatory and basically asks you to identify any potential ethical issues and handling ethical aspects of the proposal on 9 main topics. There is also a guidance on ethics, which is available online. You will be able to click on the link in this slide. Do not underestimate the importance of this table. Do not do that just at the last minutes before submission, because if you answer yes to any of these questions in this table, then you will have to complete another table with text and providing a lot of information on how you will tackle these ethical issues. So again, do this a lot before the deadline and do not wait for the last moment. I will focus quickly on some of these main 9 topics that may be relevant to you. In particular, for personal data, be aware that there are some questions regarding import and export of personal data from or to non-EU countries. And as Swiss entities, of course, you are not considered a EU country. So if you have exchange of personal data with other beneficiary based in the EU, you will have to answer here yes, because there is an exchange of personal data between EU and non-EU countries. Similar, Section 6, non-EU countries, is all about activities carried out not inside the European Union. And again, as a Swiss entity, most probably, most of these questions you will have to answer yes. If you answer yes, again, you will have then to fill in the ethics self-assessment. And this requires a bit of time because in the first part, you will have to describe the ethics issues in relation to objectives, methodology, and impact, and then to describe how you tackle these issues. On top of it, you will also need to demonstrate the compliance with ethics and legal requirements, and to show that, for example, Switzerland has the standards of at least another one EU member state. If you do not have a specific regulation, you can always just come up with the examples of activities carried out in a similar way as it would be in Switzerland and in another member state. And finally, there is also always in part A, the security issues table. This one is now compulsory for any type of project in Horizon Europe. One question that may be interesting for you is concerning the security of information agreement between Switzerland and the EU. The answer is yes, there is one in place, so you are covered there. So that was everything from my side of the implementation. And so I think we are now ready in case to take with Jenny any questions in this section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny and Nicole, for introducing the final section of the proposal template. And we have time only for one question. This is for Nicole, and the other question we will answer to the question and answer section. So I read the question for you, Nicole. Mm-hmm. In which cost category goes external work for communication activities? For example, the production of a video by a professional company, the printing of project flyers by a printer, or the rent of a booth at a fair for the presentation of the results?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, this goes under the category C, purchase costs. Maybe I quickly share again the lines of the budget table. So in purchase costs, here under C3, other goods, works, and services. This is where you would place your communication, for example, creation of flyers, etc.
Thank you very much.